Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've been paying attention to the cultural landscape lately, you might have this, nagging sensation that something is
Just completely off.
yeah, exactly off.
Yeah.
You look at the schools, the family courts, the way the media spins these narratives.
And it doesn't just feel like organic change.
Right. It feels like the fundamental rules of the game were basically rewritten while you weren't looking.
Absolutely.
So today, we're going to tear the lid off that feeling. We're doing a deep dive into an ebook that is, well, less of a standard nonfiction read and more of a...
It's a manifesto.
It really is. It's called Red Pilled on Abuse, Exposing Female Perpetrators by Conrad Riker.
And manifesto is the right word. I mean, this isn't a light read. It is an ultra-long, highly incisive, and frankly fascinating dissection of Western civilization.
Right.
Riker is essentially framing this whole thing as a red pill wake-up call. He's taking the reader back through the history of our major institutions.
Education, law, the economy.
Exactly. And arguing that you have to understand what they look like before they were, in his view, completely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
It's a massive download of information. We're talking history, evolutionary psychology, economic.
The law, all rolled into one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we even jump in, I want to say, look, if you want to understand the machinery operating behind the scenes of society, you need to hit that like and subscribe button right now.
Definitely.
Because we're covering topics you just won't hear discussed in the mainstream.
And to be clear, what we're doing today is just a taste. Riker covers so much ground, we can really only hit the high notes.
Yeah, we're just skimming the surface.
Right. So if this material resonates with you, or, if you want to see the primary data he's actually citing, you really need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books immediately and buy Red Pilled on Abuse.
You really need the full text to grasp the scope here.
You do.
So let's get into it. The book opens with a pretty bold premise.
Yeah.
It's not just saying, men have it hard.
No, it goes way further.
Yeah. It argues that the entire structure of reality we live in is artificial. He calls it the matriarchal matrix.
Right. And he's very careful to distinguish this from the movie The Matrix. We aren't talking about computer code.
Right. No sci-fi simulations.
Exactly. He's arguing we are living in a biological and psychological construct. The core argument is that Western civilization has been socially engineered to subjugate the masculine spirit.
Which explains a lot of things.
Right. Like if you've ever asked yourself, why does the world feel upside down? Or why is stoicism punished while, emotional volatility is rewarded?
Yeah, why is that?
Well, Riker says the answer lies in a concept from Jungian psychology, the terrible mother archetype.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually when we hear mother, we think of...
Nurturing, safety.
Yeah, apple pie, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what is the terrible mother?
It's the shadow side of that nurturing instinct. In Jungian terms, the good mother pushes the child out of the nest to become independent.
Right.
The terrible mother devours the child to keep them dependent.
Wow.
And Riker argues this archetype has essentially been scaled up to the level of the state. It splits the whole population into two very rigid groups.
Okay, who are they?
On one side, you have the infants. These are people who require absolute safety, who demand collectivism, and who basically need the state to manage their lives.
And on the other side?
The predators. But here's the twist.
Okay.
In this worldview, the predator isn't a criminal. The predator is the competent, self-reliant male.
The guy who doesn't need the state.
Exactly. The book argues that the terrible mother state views male competence as an existential threat because it breaks that cycle of dependency.
So the system is designed to punish them.
Punish, tax, and silence these quote-unquote predators to protect the eternal infants.
That is a pretty dark image. This idea that the state effectively wants to keep everyone in diapers.
Yeah, it is.
But how is this actually enforced? Because, we don't see government agents walking around explicitly telling men to stop being competent.
Right. It's way more subtle than that. Riker introduces an acronym for the enforcement mechanism, GSR.
GSR. And this is one of the stickiest concepts in the book.
It really is. It stands for gossip, shame, and rallying. Riker digs into evolutionary psychology here.
Right, how men and women handle conflict differently.
Exactly. He argues that while men historically settled disputes through direct confrontation or, physical aggression, this modern control grid relies on female-coded warfare.
Which is more indirect.
Very indirect, but devastatingly effective in a social species like ours.
So walk us through the GSR complex. How does that actually play out in the real world?
Well, it starts with gossip.
Okay.
This is the covert gathering of information. the whisper network, like who said what, who holds a problematic opinion. It's about building a dossier on someone without them even knowing it.
And then,
Once the target is identified, you move to shame.
and this is where we see all the labeling, right?
Precisely. Riker points out that in this system, noncompliance isn't met with a logical counterargument.
Right, they don't debate you.
No, it's met with a moral judgment. You don't hear, you're wrong because of this fact. You hear, that's toxic masculinity, or that's creepy, or check your privilege.
So the goal isn't to win a debate.
Not at all. The goal is to frame the man's behavior as a moral failing that totally excludes him from polite society.
Wow. And then the R rallying.
That's the kill shot.
Yeah.
Once the gossip is verified and the shame label is applied, the hive mind is mobilized. Riker basically describes this as industrialized cancel culture.
A weaponized swarm.
Exactly. You rally the community to destroy the person's reputation, their livelihood, their social standing.
The book also ties this into what he calls the weaponization of empathy, which I found fascinating because, we're conditioned to think empathy is always a virtue.
Always a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But Riker argues it's being used as a bludgeon. He uses the term crybully.
Crybully, it's a paradox.
Yeah, it's someone who adopts the posture of a victim in order to act as a bully. And it exploits a very deep biological instinct in men.
The instinct to protect women.
Exactly. The book calls this damseling. If a man is winning a logical argument, and the woman suddenly cries or claims she feels unsafe,
The argument is over.
done. The man's biological programming literally overrides his logic, and he retreats. Riker argues this has been weaponized on a societal scale to make facts secondary to feelings.
Which leads right into tone policing.
Right. Tone policing is this idea that how you say something matters way more than what you say.
So if you present a brutal fact,
Like crime statistics or economic data.
yeah, and you do it in a way that hurts someone's feelings, the fact is just discarded.
Discarded completely. Riker argues this effectively makes reality illegal. If the truth is quote-unquote mean, then the truth is not allowed.
So that's the psychological layer.
Yeah.
But the book argues this has migrated out of our heads and into our actual institution.
Right, it's institutionalized now.
And the first stop on this tour of institutional capture is the education system, what Riker calls the war on boys.
And this section is very heavy on statistics. Riker describes schools as containment zones for the Y chromosome.
Containment zones.
Yeah. He argues that the modern classroom is designed perfectly for girls. Sit still, face forward, be quiet, repeat the teacher.
Right. And boys are biologically wired for movement, for competition, kinetic learning.
Exactly. But in this environment, that biology is treated as defective.
And the fix for this defectiveness is pretty medical.
It is. The book highlights that boys are diagnosed with ADHD at rates 2 to 3 times higher than girls.
2 to 3 times.
Yeah, Riker calls this chemical castration. He argues we are drugging millions of boys to make them behave like compliant girls.
We are educating them.
No, we're curing them of their masculinity because the system views male energy as a literal pathology.
And for the boys who make it through that, and get to university, the environment doesn't exactly shift back in their favor.
Oh no, it intensifies. Riker charts the historical shift from the trivium.
Which is the classical education, right? Grammar, logic, rhetoric.
Exactly. The shift from that to the modern university focus on safe spaces and emotional validation. But the most dangerous part, according to the book, is the legal environment on campus.
The Title IX tribunals.
We have to talk about Title IX.
Yeah, these are the disciplinary hearings for sexual misconduct. But Riker refers to them as kangaroo courts. Why is that?
Because they completely stripped away the centuries-old standard of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right, the bedrock of the justice system.
Exactly. In a Title IX hearing, the standard is often preponderance of the evidence, which basically just means it's 51% likely this happened.
And the accused often isn't even allowed to cross-examine the accuser.
Right. Riker argues this was a deliberate restructuring to strip men of due process, ensuring that an accusation is functionally the same thing as a conviction.
This theme of the legal system being rigged against men is just a huge part of Red Pilled on Abuse.
It's central to the whole thesis.
And we really have to pivot to what might be the most financially devastating part of this matrix, the family courts.
Ah, yes. What Riker calls the divorce industrial complex.
This is where the book gets very granular with the economics. The headline stat he cites is that women initiate 70 to 80% of divorces.
70 to 80%.
Right, but to explain why that is, Riker introduces Briffault's law.
Yeah, Briffault's law.
I've heard of this. It's from biology, right?
Correct. Robert Briffault was a surgeon and anthropologist. His law states basically that the female dictates the terms of the relationship because she bears the biological cost of reproduction.
Okay.
So if the female derives no benefit from association with the male, the association ends.
And Riker applies this to the modern state.
He does. He argues the state has stepped in to act as the surrogate husband.
The surrogate husband. That is a powerful metaphor.
It really is. It means the woman no longer needs the individual man for provision or protection. She has the state for that.
Right.
Through the family court system, she can extract the man's resources: alimony, child support, assets.
Without having to tolerate the man himself.
Exactly. The state enforces the transfer.
Riker actually uses a finance term to describe no-fault divorce. He calls it a call option on a man's life.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Can you break that down for the listeners who aren't, day trading?
Sure. So in finance, a call option gives you the right to control an asset with the ability to cash out at a certain price whenever you want.
Okay.
Riker argues that modern marriage is essentially a contract where the woman holds a call option on the man's future labor.
Wow.
She can choose to stay in the marriage, or she can choose to exercise her option, divorce him for no reason, thanks to no-fault laws, and cash out half his assets plus his future earnings.
It turns marriage into a massive financial liability for men.
Because the exit clause is entirely unilateral.
And God forbid the police get involved in a domestic dispute.
Yeah.
The book spends a lot of time breaking down the Duluth model.
Yes. This is absolutely critical to understand.
What is it?
The Duluth model is the framework used by police departments across the U.S. and elsewhere to determine who to arrest in a domestic violence call. And it is explicitly built on a Marxist power dynamic framework. It posits that domestic violence is inherently patriarchal. It's a tool men use to control women.
Okay, but how does that apply if, say, the woman is the one hitting the man?
That's the catch. The model instructs police to identify the primary aggressor, but the training often defines the aggressor as the person with the institutional power.
And since the model assumes men hold the structural power.
The man is almost always identified as the aggressor, by default.
So Riker argues this leads to situations where a man can call the police because he's actively being attacked.
And when the cops show up, he gets arrested.
Because the framework sees him as the oppressor no matter what the actual evidence is.
Exactly. It seems like every institution Riker examines, the schools, the courts, the police, they all operate on this exact same oppressor-oppressed logic.
Which brings us to the economic bottom line of all this, the net negative taxpayer.
Right. This is the macro view of the whole system.
Riker claims that when you break down tax revenue by gender, men are the vast majority of net positive taxpayers.
Meaning they pay more into the system than they take out.
Right. And women, as a demographic group, are net negative, meaning they consume more in state services, welfare, and benefits than they actually pay in taxes.
So he's framing the entire government as a massive wealth transfer scheme.
Exactly. He argues the state is basically a machine that confiscates wealth from men to fund the terrible mother system.
The very system that renders those same men obsolete in the home.
It's a closed loop of extraction.
It really is. Now, we've covered the law and the money, but red-pilled on abuse goes even deeper. It gets into the biology.
Yeah.
There was one section that really blew my mind, the pill paradox.
Yes, the pill paradox. This is where the red pill meets hard science.
Walk us through what he says there.
So Riker discusses research on hormonal birth control. The theory is that the pill mimics pregnancy hormones in the body.
Right.
And when a woman is on the pill, her biological preference for a mate actually shifts. She tends to prefer men with more beta traits.
Beta traits, like softer features, more cooperative, just less dominant. Essentially safe providers.
So she meets a nice guy, falls in love, and marries him while she's on the pill.
Right. But then they decide they want to have kids. So she stops taking the pill.
Her natural hormonal cycle returns.
Exactly. And suddenly, her biological attraction signals flip entirely. She finds herself viscerally turned off by the safe husband she married.
Wow.
And she starts craving high testosterone, dominant alpha traits. Riker argues this biological bait and switch is a massive unspoken driver of the divorce epidemic and infidelity.
That is wild. And that connects directly to the broader civilizational warning in the book, doesn't it?
It does. Riker compares our current trajectory to the collapse of Sparta. He uses the term oliganthropia.
Oliganthropia, what does that mean?
It literally means a shortage of men. Riker notes that in the late stages of the Spartan Empire, the women actually ended up controlling the vast majority of the land and wealth.
They focused on luxury, status, and comfort, rather than raising the next generation of warriors. The birth rate collapsed, the warrior class basically vanished, and Sparta was conquered.
And Riker sees the exact same pattern happening in the West today.
100%. He also brings up RK selection theory to explain it.
This is an evolutionary biology concept, right? But he applies it to parenting.
Yes. So in nature, K selection is the strategy of having very few offspring but investing heavily in them. Think wolves or elephants.
You prepare them to survive a harsh world.
Right. On the flip side, rice selection is the strategy of having tons of offspring and investing very little. Think rabbits or fish. You just rely on the environment to provide.
And how does that tie into society?
Riker argues the welfare state encourages rice selection. It heavily subsidizes low investment parenting. We're shifting from a society of wolves, high competence, high investment, to a society of rabbits, high dependency. And he argues that a civilization of rabbits simply cannot survive.
And the key to survival, according to the book, is testosterone.
Yes, he makes a pretty fierce defense of what the mainstream media calls toxic masculinity.
He flips that script entirely, doesn't he?
He does. He talks about the cortisol-stoicism ratio. He argues that the exact traits we are currently trying to medicate out of boys,
Aggression, risk-taking, stoicism.
the drive to dominate.
Yeah.
He says those traits are actually the immune system of civilization.
They're what built the world.
Exactly. These are the traits that build skyscrapers, fight wars, maintain order. Riker says that toxic masculinity is just a slur for the very energy that keeps the lights on.
Suppressing it isn't progress.
No, it's suicide.
So, we have the diagnosis. We're living in a matriarchal matrix. Policing is rigged by the Duluth model. Marriage is a financial trap. And our biology is being hijacked.
It is a lot to take in.
But Riker doesn't just leave us in the pit. He actually offers a path out, what he calls reclaiming sovereignty.
Yes, and the solution starts in the mind. The first step is intellectual self-defense. Riker points us back to the trivium.
That classical education we lost, how does he suggest men use that today?
Well, it's about dismantling the manipulation we talked about earlier. First is grammar.
Which means defining your terms.
Exactly. When someone says, we need equity, don't just nod along. Ask them, do you mean equality of opportunity or forced equality of outcome?
You stop the manipulation right at the definition level.
Right. Second is logic. Use syllogisms to expose fallacies. If A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. He wants men to become rigorous logicians to cut through all the emotional noise.
And third is rhetoric.
Yes, the art of persuasion. But specifically, Riker advises learning to aggressively reject emotional framing.
This sounded a lot like the Stefan Molyneux protocol, not an argument.
Exactly that. It's the absolute discipline of saying, your tears are not an argument, your offense is not an argument.
It's refusing to accept the premise that hurting someone's feelings invalidates a fact.
Exactly. It's the only way to break that GSR gossip, shame, rally cycle.
He also gives some very practical physical steps, one of them being men's sheds.
Yes. We need spaces that are explosively male. Riker argues that the mere presence of women changes the dynamic. Men naturally start competing for attention or moderating their speech.
So he calls for the creation of men's sheds.
Physical spaces for mentorship, skill building, and speaking freely without the thought police. It's about rebuilding that band of brothers dynamic that the system has totally atomized.
And on the financial side, he talks about crypto-gynocentrism.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is basically asset protection. Riker advises using decentralized finance and blockchain to keep resources completely out of the reach of the divorce industrial complex.
Because if the state acts as the surrogate husband to seize your assets, you need a vault the state literally can't crack.
Exactly. He views crypto not just as an investment, but as a literal shield for sovereignty.
And finally, there's the personal commitment, monk mode.
Monk mode. This is the ultimate rejection of the matrix. It's a period of intense focus on self-improvement.
Rejecting the cheap dopamine?
Yeah. The porn, the junk food, the mindless scrolling, the constant validation seeking.
It's a commitment to becoming physically strong, mentally sharp, and economically independent.
It's about becoming the predator, the highly competent man that the system is so afraid of.
The book wraps up with a pretty haunting image. Riker says we are witnessing the reign of the sterile sovereign.
A culture that consumes but cannot create.
That is the exact thought he leaves you with. The current system views you as tax livestock.
Wow, tax livestock.
Yeah. It wants you to produce resources, pay your taxes, and stay totally silent. And the question Riker poses to the reader is very simple.
Are you going to accept that role?
Or are you going to reclaim your intellectual sovereignty?
And that is the question you need to answer for yourself. Listen, we've covered a ton of ground today, but I cannot stress this enough. We have barely scratched the surface of the historical data, the charts, and the specific case studies in this book.
You really have to read it for yourself to see the full picture.
You do. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy Red Pilled on Abuse by Conrad Riker. It is a purchase you absolutely won't regret.
And this conversation is happening in real time. If you want to stay updated with the author's latest analysis, you need to follow @Conrad and Riker on Substack.
Yeah, @Conrad and Riker on Substack. That's where the real community is gathering.
Exactly.
So go check out the Substack, get the book, and before you close this app, make sure you hit like and subscribe to this deep dive.
We're going to keep bringing you the content you need to hear.
We're going to keep driving deep into the exact topics they don't want you to discuss. Stay sovereign, everyone. We'll see you in the next deep dive.